Senator Xenophon.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. I rise to speak tonight on an issue of utmost seriousness that I believe deserves a great deal of scrutiny by law enforcement agencies and by this Parliament. In the past few weeks, I've been contacted by former members of the Church of Scientology after I questioned the tax-exempt status the organisation has under our tax laws during an interview with the 7 Network's Today Tonight program. I want to take this opportunity to pay tribute to the work of reporter Brian Seymour, who under the leadership of Today Tonight executive producer Craig McPherson has prepared more than 24 stories on this organisation. I also commend the network for its willingness to dedicate considerable resources in the courts to ensure these stories have rightly gotten to air. I was also concerned by a recent story in the Australian newspaper about the coronial inquest into the death of Edward McBride. Coroner John Locke had requested personal records of Mr McBride held by the Church of Scientology as part of the inquest, but these documents were not forthcoming. Instead, they were shifted by the organisation from Brisbane to Sydney and then on to the United States. Since making those initial comments about taxation on the Today Tonight program, a number of former followers of Scientology have written to me. These people rightly see themselves as victims of Scientology, and they have provided long and detailed letters to me about the workings of this organisation. I seek leave to have copies of these letters tabled, some of which have had the names of some Scientology followers deleted with the permission of the authors. I seek leave.
Is leave granted? There being no objection, leave is granted, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. Having read the statements and subsequently met with the people who provided them, as well as reading a significant amount of research conducted by my office, I'm deeply concerned about this organisation and the devastating impact it could have on its followers. In my view, this is a two-faced organisation. There is a public face of an organisation founded in 1953 by the late science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard that claims to offer guidance and support to its followers. And there is a private face of an organisation that abuses its followers and viciously targets its critics and seems largely driven by paranoia. In France, the organisation was recently convicted of fraud, and it is also facing charges in Belgium. Meanwhile, in the USA, a number of former high-ranking Scientology executives have broken their silence about the organisation, talking to the St. Petersburg Times in Florida, where its international headquarters are located. The executives say they have witnessed the head of the organisation, David Miscavige, assault staff members dozens of times, and they say he has also urged others to commit assault. The executives also claim the organisation has used blackmail and threats against former members and perceived critics of the organisation, and that the organisation has knowingly, repeatedly obstructed justice. Claims have also been made that information provided to the organisation by members during what is known as auditing sessions, which are a crude hybrid of confession and counselling, and for which the organisation claims so-called priest penitent privilege, was then used to blackmail and manipulate members. What we are seeing is a worldwide pattern of abuse and criminality, and on the body of evidence, this is not happening by accident, it is happening by design. Scientology is not a religious organisation. It is a criminal organisation that hides behind its so-called religious beliefs. What you believe does not mean you are not accountable for how you behave. The letters received by me, which were written by former followers in Australia, contains extensive allegations of crimes and abuses that are truly shocking. Crimes against them and crimes they say they were coerced into committing. There are allegations of false imprisonment, coerced abortions and embezzlement of church funds, of physical violence and intimidation, blackmail and the widespread and deliberate abuse of information obtained by the organisation. It is alleged that information about suspicious deaths and child abuse has been destroyed, and one follower has admitted that he was coerced by the organisation into perjuring himself during investigations into the deaths of his 2 daughters. These victims of Scientology claim it is an abusive, manipulative, violent and criminal organisation, and that criminality is condoned at the highest levels. Aaron Saxton is one of the victims of Scientology who wrote to me. He was born into the organisation and rose to a position of influence in Sydney and the United States. He says in his statement that his mother was coerced into signing over guardianship of him when he was a child to a Scientology official so he could be moved to Australia. In or around January 1990, he was told by the organisation not to report the attempted rape of him by a man. He says this was due to the organisation's public relations policy. Aaron was still a child when he says he was asked to cover up the defrauding of credit cards and cash by a Scientology employee. He says the organisation exercised frightening levels of control over followers. At least 10 times he was forced to endure a diet of beans and rice for periods of up to 2 weeks as punishment. And because of Scientology's bans on medications and seeking medical attention, he says he was forced at times to extract his own teeth without the aid of painkillers. At age 16, Aaron says he was made a security guard for the church. In this role, he says he issued so-called non-communication orders on no less than half a dozen families, including his own. These orders forced members of the organisation to cut off all contact with relatives and friends for fear of punishment. In his statement, Aaron says he was also forced to participate in the illegal confinement and torture of a follower who was kept under house arrest. Aaron says he accessed more than 150 files that contained personal information on followers, much of which was obtained during so-called auditing. This information is meant to be confidential. It is not. Aaron says this information was used to blackmail followers to keep them in the church, as well as to discredit former followers if they left. This was a condoned violation of the so-called priest-penitent privilege. Aaron says he was also involved in deleting files of a member who had suicided. Disturbingly, Aaron has also spoken out against the organisation's policy on abortions. He says while under control of Scientology, he was involved in coercing female followers to have abortions. He says this was in line with a policy designed to keep followers loyal to the organisation and to allow them to keep working for the organisation. Aaron says women who fell pregnant were taken to offices and bullied to have an abortion. If they refused, they faced demotion and hard labour. Aaron says the hope in the organisation was that if these pregnant women were given these punishments, they would give in and have an abortion or miscarry. Aaron says one staff member used a coat hanger and self-aborted her child for fear of punishment. He says she was released from the organisation and the files were destroyed. In 1991, Aaron says he was sent to Scientology headquarters in Florida, where he was involved in the removal of funds from Scientology bank accounts to pay for private services for executives in the organisation. He also says he was made to falsify bank records and ordered more than 30 people to be sent to Scientology's work camps where they were forced to undertake hard labour. He also says he used personal and financial information of followers to track them down if they tried to leave. Aaron has said the organisation forced him to create fraudulent education certificates for children under the age of 15 in order to allow them to work for the organisation. He also says he was coerced into putting 5 individuals under house arrest on 5 separate occasions. These people were not permitted to leave until the organisation had obtained, through coercion, the statements it wanted. Aaron also claims knowledge of 2 instances where followers in the United States confessed to murder, but where this information was not passed on to police. He also says while in the United States, he was ordered by superiors to remove documents that would link a Scientology staff member to murder. Aaron says he and other members opened the files of several celebrity Scientologists in order to glean information which could be used as leverage to force a greater commitment to the organisation. Some might call that blackmail. In his statement, he also details attempts which were made to coerce one celebrity Scientologist into having an abortion. He says the young man who impregnated the celebrity was forced from the organisation and cut off from his parents, who remained Scientologists. Aaron said he was so heavily under the control of the organisation's bizarre power structure, he was complicit in ordering the beating of one follower and facilitated the beating of another. He says he was ordered to help a Scientologist who was hiding from authorities and admits to ordering the throwing overboard of a man from the Scientology ship, the Freewinds. He is not sure if this order was ever carried out. Aaron has now left the organisation and is willing to cooperate with police investigations into these matters. He was born into the cult and he says he regrets the control it had over him and the things he did as a result. I ask my fellow senators, do these things sound like religious activities to you?